You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 172 of Arsenal Pass. This weekend marks the event that is Pro Tour Amsterdam. This is Flesh and Blood's 5th Pro Tour, crazy to think, right Brendan, and 7th Tier 4 event, including the World Championships. I mean, it just feels like yesterday that we're on our way to New Jersey for Pro Tour number 1.
It does. This is actually the first Pro Tour that neither I or you will be attending. Obviously, I didn't play Baltimore, and you didn't play Baltimore, but I was casting. It's the first time there's been a Pro Tour in Flesh and Blood history that Hayden and I have not attended in one way or another, which is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to be in Amsterdam. We'll get into that. I think this is going to be a very interesting event. I really do. I would love to be there. But, you know, life's life, right? And traveling to Europe is, especially from my neck of the woods, is really difficult. You don't even start.
I know. I'm actually empathizing with you here. I saw Nick Butcher's message saying it was 28 hours to get over there. I'm just like, nah.
That's a good flight as well. Like, honestly, like it can take upwards of 30 hours, depending if you want to go a little bit of a cheaper route. But anyway, digress. Episode 172 of the pod. We are doing an Amsterdam preview pod. Very excited for the Pro Tour this weekend. I think there's a lot to get into. Talk about the meta, talk about players, talk about formats, etc. Pro Tour actually Magic. The Magic Pro Tour just happened in Amsterdam as well, which is quite interesting. And that Pro Tour champion is going to be there trying to go back to back in Amsterdam, playing Flesh and Blood this weekend. So we'll see if Simon Nielsen can do that.
Yeah, Simon Nielsen, the GOAT. Yeah, what a fascinating human being and a fascinating series of events he's rattled off. It's like, I don't know, just by sheer variance, it should not be possible, but he somehow has done it. It's actually incredible.
And players have done it before, right? You look back at the likes of Kai Bude and players like that.
Yeah,
you know?
That was during the age of information asymmetry, though. This is the age of information symmetry, where people have access to information, but somehow Simon is still edging them out. And what? How?
Yeah, I mean, very consistent. Obviously, I think this is his first win since the World Championship player of the year. What's gonna be interesting though, the funniest thing about Simon is he like kind of drops into the kind of wider team Discord 2 weeks before the event, after kind of Pro Tour Amsterdam for Magic wraps up, and goes, "All right, where are we at? This is where I'm at." And then immediately he's a big contributor. Immediately starts diving into Limited, sharing his thoughts and trying to gather information. So he's a very information rich based player. Like, he loves to see that information. So anyway, I'm really excited to see a lot of the players that are in that wider group this weekend. You know, got to see, actually on the weekend, spend some time with a friend of yours, Sasha Markovic. We played some of his game prototype with Nick Butcher, Matt Rogers. They were all about to head to Amsterdam, so Matt stopped over in Sydney before they headed over to Amsterdam with Tom Dowling as well. We got out, went to a bit of like a games kind of bar and cafe, which was quite nice, and played some Flesh and Blood and played some of Sasha's prototype game. So it was a very cool weekend.
I saw some unfortunate news in regards to some flights for some members of the testing group there.
Yeah,
so some flight cancellations.
Booking last minute. Yeah, flying out of the US must hit, like, the amount of flights that get cancelled out of the US, especially if you're trying to do a connecting flight. Like, if you're flying directly out, I usually find it's fine. Any kind of connections in the US is always, I hate flying to the East Coast because almost always there's delays or cancellations with connections with internal flights in the US, and it just sucks. So much.
So apparently the fallout from the CrowdStrike thing is pretty large. So what happens, from what I've heard with these airlines, is it actually cascades for like a very, very long time. I've heard that, the cancellations in the last 4 years have all been cascades from COVID, apparently, from like when the pilots, like, I don't know if they went on strike or what, but apparently like it's still happening. Like, they're still trying to catch up. And then you just exacerbate that with the CrowdStrike thing. So there was a lot of people that flew into Dallas this past weekend for an event. And the amount of cancellations and delays was actually incredible. Most of them did not even get out on the day they were supposed to leave. So I can imagine it's affecting people going to Europe right now.
I don't know. I might call cap on that one. Knowing some people who work in the aviation industry, that's not my understanding. I think it's more about airlines being under-resourced, and under-resourced is probably a big part of it right now, honestly. Mm-hmm. Flights getting cancelled from over, like, a lot of fatigue and things like that. So
pilots go legal and stuff. Yeah.
it's also the same for crew as well, like the crew on the cabin crew as well. So
yeah, just quickly before we move on to Flesh and Blood, people on the pod who've been listening probably know this, but one time on the way back from Europe, I got delayed in Washington D.C. for a week, entire week. Crazy.
I would just rent a car at that point.
I mean, at least I know, they put us in a hotel, but yeah, it wasn't me. They didn't say, "Hey, your flight is delayed a week." They told me every single day.
They just kept delaying.
Yeah, hey, come to the airport.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. This week in Flesh and Blood, talked a little bit about my weekend a little bit. Spent some time, as I said, playing some Flesh and Blood with some friends, playing some other games. Also, did a bit of testing over the week. I did a bit of research during the week in preparation for this pod, Brendan, and wanted to play some games with some heroes and some decks that people were talking about, and see what I thought of the meta before we got into this preview pod, basically, and played some games with some cool heroes. To be honest, it's interesting.
Yeah, so you got some results there for us. Yeah, I figured.
We'll get to it.
Someone's been on a little tweet spree over there, stirring up the pot on Twitter.
What have I been saying?
Oh, bro, you want me to read you verbatim? You were nice enough to.
Go on then.
Okay. Fiondale, July 24th, 2024, 12,000 views, 5:59 p.m. MST slaps. My experience with this format so far is that there is a lot of space to innovate in. If you think this format is straightforward and boring, you've missed a lot of testing for this PT. Contrary to some other opinions, I, for one, am a bit sad to be missing this one! !
Well, okay, to be fair, this might be partly kind of just frustration of just what I was seeing on Twitter of people just having a whinge at being at the Pro Tour, which is just ridiculous, honestly.
I saw a lot of that.
I don't get it. If you don't want to play, don't play. Go and enjoy Amsterdam, whatever. But honestly. But also, I think people are missing at least a few tricks. So there's been the two things, I think, two streams of discourse over the past kind of 2 weeks. I think people coming to the realization that Zen post-ban is still a very, very good deck, if not the best deck in the format, which we'll get to, one of the best decks in the format, right? And probably going to see a lot of heavy play this coming weekend across the Calling, Pro Tour, etc. Fine. And I think that is one thing. People have some frustration about the gameplay in Flesh and Blood right now. But cast your mind back to the Starvo format, and honestly, it's not too dissimilar in terms of, and people say, wow, Chain was more interesting, Prism was more interesting. There are a ton of interesting decks in this format. People are just so fixated on the Zen gameplay patterns as opposed to the wider format gameplay patterns. And actually, I think that's going to be at a lot of people's detriment for this weekend, when I think Zen is not going to be as played as people think it might be.
Yeah, to be fair, I actually thought that PT Lille was pretty ass. That was like...
So I agree. That was actually the worst. That was the most
draft suck too.
Simplistic of that kind of gameplay format. Like, honestly, I think from my experience testing for nationals, testing post-ban, yes, like equipment is frustrating. Like, because the thing is, I think Traverse and Striders, right, being on the board always create a very, very similar play experience, and people are trying to work out, okay, how do I play around this? I think once you accept that part of the format as being given, like at some point they're going to block with these, and this is going to happen. These permanents are effectively on the board that are going to go to their hand. You can have so much fun with this format, and you can innovate, and there's so much space. Whereas when we went to Lille, it felt like there was 2 or 3 decks max you could play. Honestly, probably
there
2.
There was like 1 deck. Of course there were other decks, but like if you were not, I don't think you could get a reasonable edge by not playing Briar. I think that you could get an edge on Briar potentially with some of these like very niche decks, but you were opening yourself up.
You could play Ultim and try and dodge the prisms and the ice.
Yeah, you're opening yourself up to so much matchup variance. It was like, yeah. I assumed that if you just did the math, like it would just not work out. It's just like Briar, just play Briar, you know?
Maybe Gym Roulette.
Yeah.
Well, actually, so hold on to that thought, because that's something that I think is worth talking about for this weekend. Is if you have a bad matchup into Zen, is that okay? That is going to be my question I pose to you. Can you have a bad matchup into Zen this coming weekend?
I would venture no, but I mean,
I think the answer might be yes, but we will get into that.
Okay, you better have some numbers to back it up.
I definitely do.
Okay.
Plus, I've got rhetoric.
Yep. Right. Yeah, I mean, the rhetoric tells me like everybody's playing Zen.
Interesting. All right. Let's get into, I guess, we're kind of news. We talked about last week's Skirmish Season 9, Blitz and Living Legend, kicking off in the next couple of weeks. I'm been told in the comments, Brendan, that I should be playing Chain. Also got told on our Discord to play Chain. And you know what? I love playing Chain. So I'm definitely going to go to at least one Living Legend skirmish and play Chain. Lock it in.
Keen to see what that deck build looks like in 2024.
Yes, me too. If anyone has a list they want to share, please do so. A couple of Battle Hardens over the weekend. We will break down all the results. But Bologna and Bali, two very cool places. Obviously on the way to Amsterdam. I think Bologna, makes sense. People are traveling through. But I also saw a few people who traveled to Bali on the way to Amsterdam as well. Notably the New Zealanders. And shout out to Thomas Galbraith winning on Zen in Bali. And Max, the Hype Nitro taking out in Bologna. Francisco Lorenzi there. So shout out to those two. Command and Cookout?
Let's do it. Command and Cookout. All right. If you want to get your question read out.
Comment section.
Yeah.
Well, sorry.
I was just going to say.
You take it.
You want to be a part of this? You want to be a shrimpy on this, Barbie? Just comment on YouTube and we'll get it queued up. Also, there's a Discord. Arsenal Pass Discord. Command and Cookout channel. All right. First one is from Andrew. They say, glad you aren't going to die, man. You know what? Me too. Also, yeah.
But they're talking about you or me.
Me, for sure. It's definitely the kidney stuff. It's also nice to get a clean bill of health after 6-7 years. That was a shitty time in my life, but I don't know, perspective. Next one is from Justin. They say, I didn't realize this was a health and fitness podcast. Oh God. There's a podcast I have for Marvel Snap where we do not talk about Marvel Snap for the most part because the game is something. And there's just a meme that is unhinged at this point where people say, this is my favorite X podcast. They just name some random shit that happened in the podcast and people will come up.
My favorite cooking podcast.
Anything. People come up to me in person at Lorcana events and they tell me this is my favorite something podcast. It is that podcast, as soon as it goes up, it gets 100 comments of people doing that shit. The engagement, I'm not even trying to engagement farm. It's just, I can't control it anymore. That better not happen here.
Hey, I will.
You'll take 100 comments of just bullshit.
Sure. Well, maybe not. I was going to ask you though, if you want to take something off topic, what's your favorite recent purchase you've made?
Oof, that's interesting.
I just asked because I'm currently wearing mine. I got a pair of slippers. I've never been a slipper guy, but I got a pair of slippers this week and I'm wearing them. It's cold in Sydney, comparative. We are, comparative to what summer is. And I got a pair of slippers for the first time and my feet are toasty warm, Brendan. So.
I
might be too warm.
I don't really have a thing. I had some well-spent money when I was in San Diego on food, not going to lie.
There you go.
Awesome places. So I'm happy with that purchase.
You'll get more opportunities.
Yes, sir.
Next YouTube comment.
Windrunner. Really great episode. Thanks for reaching out to all the deck builders and passing along advice, especially Ethnic Smoke's tip. We actually had somebody else reach out to us and give us a similar comment. I'll keep them anonymous until now, but maybe we'll have them back on the pod at some time. I don't know if you saw that little Discord ping.
It was nice to,
yeah,
it was nice to get that. I just going back to the health and fitness podcast. I didn't talk about it in This Week in Flesh and Blood, but I've got my, not in Amsterdam, but I am doing a Hyrox competition this week.
Break that down for everybody.
Just Google it.
Come on, tell us. There's no way 90% of people here know what the fuck you're talking about.
I feel like it's a bit of a fad at the moment, honestly. It's basically a bunch of running and a bunch of exercises and try and survive. I don't know.
Okay.
But Brendan has been asking me on and off about my running, and I feel like I'm getting a bit better, but also I can breathe properly again, Brendan. Finally, after 3 weeks of being sick, I can actually start to breathe properly.
I throw these nose strips on. I shattered my nose when I was a kid.
I've seen that.
Yeah, bro. God, I got a fucking jet engine on my face. It's crazy. Versus when I don't have it, I can't breathe. It's actually such a hack. Those little nose strips. They have a little piece of plastic that perforates and it actually just pulls your nose open. But it's a huge difference for me running. For my running, I've been really doing longer distances. I've just been focusing on trying to be faster. So yeah, I'm running about 7:30 pace right now, but I haven't run more than 3 miles at that pace. That's pretty good for me. I started.
What is that in kilometers? I don't even know.
Oh, it's almost 5K.
Okay. Yeah.
So just trying to be faster. I feel like if I didn't sort of make that active decision, I would just be slow for the rest of my life because that's my default is snail pace.
Right. Yep. I I don't know what that is, but fantastic.
Don't know what is.
Kilometers. All right. And yeah, shout out to when Runner said about Ethnic Smoke's tip. Just going back to Flesh and Blood in the pod last week, Ethnic Smoke's tip was possibly my favorite. I think I shouted that out. But yeah, I want to do more of those sorts of things. I love getting the view and opinion of the top players in the world, especially top players on specific topics. I love getting them on as well. Like I think generally we would bring on a guest in that situation, but I think when it came to deck building, but I think there's so many people out there that I wanted to hear from, whereas other topics we might default to a guest. But I think we will do more of this thing in the future. So if you want to see it, definitely let us know that you liked it so we can make sure that we get more things like that.
Hot take. I like guests. I think we've had some fantastic guest episodes over the years, but
some of the best.
I think that the previous episode in the format was superior. I think there are some guests that are very specialized in what. Yes, I would prefer to hear from more people with differing opinions.
Yeah,
I thought that was incredible. I vastly prefer that format, to be honest.
I like them. I told you, I was messaging them. I said, I've got a banger. I've come up with a great one. I'm really excited about this. And honestly, I was really happy with the responses we got as well. There were people who were messaging me. I messaged people pretty early in the week and they were like, great question. Can I have a day to think about this? I was like, you can have as much time as you need. I'm recording at X time. And then people came back with like some really in-depth and thought-out messages, which I really appreciate. So we will definitely reach out to those people again, but also others who, maybe we didn't get on this time.
Ended up being a bonjour, eh?
Want to keep going?
Let's do it. Next one here is from Dustvim. Dustvim has been commenting on this podcast for, I think,
since day one.
Yeah, like 3 years. Love this sort of evergreen content. Hope there is more to come. Also, is there any chance we ever get Time of the Round back? Missing those days. Smiley face or great pod.
This is Peter's great pod.
Yeah. Yo, that's actually hilarious. I don't think so. So Time of the Round, that's the interview segment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think so. That's so funny because I was literally asking Hayden a question regarding podcasts and interviews and like some sort of etiquette stuff right before we came on, and I was talking about some of the downsides of that stuff. So I think ultimately there's no way that we have the bandwidth for that now. Maybe we did. No. Maybe we did a year or 2 years ago, but unfortunately not now.
I think it would just take away from other content that I already feel like I can't make the content I want to make, just time-wise.
Yeah,
and resource-wise, but that's something that I think would take away even more from the potential to do things like deck techs and whatnot.
So, for what it's worth, I do think there is a opening in the market nowadays for that kind of content.
Why is that, Brendan?
If somebody wants to hop on these interviews type things, there's not a lot going around anymore.
Do you know what? In the comments below, if you're listening to this on YouTube or if you're on Spotify and you want to jump across the comments, who are people that you like to listen to in the Flesh and Blood world? Whether you think they just have a nice voice, they speak well. Like someone that comes to mind for me is Sam O'Byrne, right? I think he speaks very articulately. He's great to hear. But other people?
I like Tarek.
Because also, yeah, okay.
I like Brian. I like... Yeah, there's some great ones, actually.
If you leave more people out, if you say too many more names,
people are going to feel left out. I mean, Tarek's a repeat guest. There's a reason we've done that. He can kind of... I feel like anytime we have him on any topic, even if we disagree, they just get great combos out of that guy. Yeah.
Rumor has it, actually, someone asked me, is Tarek ever subcontracted? That's what I heard.
Yeah, if we talk about us not having the bandwidth to do content, that guy definitely doesn't. Like a full-time doctor, healer of people. Next
Three more questions.
Yeah, Vilter. Interesting topic about stamping cards for some events. This could be easily done for major events if LSS is willing to special print decks with QR codes where you can track every card down to what card is in what pack. I don't like the idea of this for most events, but when there's 50K, so USD plus events, it is reasonable, and bonus points for collectors that want the unfancy card used in the winners list on Worlds, for example.
Mm-hmm. True. I mean, I think that's a lot of. To be fair, okay, I can see two sides of this. On one hand, it's like that seems like complicated, a lot of work for what it is, but also draft hasn't changed in games for the longest time. So I think making sure, like it's not like all of a sudden they put all this infrastructure in to do something like this potentially, right? Set up a kind of QR card system, custom prints for Pro Tours or whatever. And then 2 years later, draft changes and that system becomes obsolete or whatever. Like that's not going to happen, I think. I guess the real issue would be around like collectability of things like this and printing extra stuff that's outside of boxes and print run cycles and stuff like that.
So I don't think it's a bad idea. I do think there's very close to 0% that LSS would execute it. Because I mean, this is a lot. It sounds easier. I think it sounds a lot easier in words than it is to logistically pull off. Yeah, it'd be a lot. And also, it's like, how much integrity are we actually gaining by this system versus just like stamping the packs?
I agree. I mean, easily is a interesting word used here, but yeah. I think it is something that could be on the table. But I do think, I guess the one thing with stamping, right, is that stamping still opens doors and both to human error in terms of the pack creation and collation and things like this, which we've talked about many times before, but also which we won't get into, but also just in terms of still open avenues to potentially game the system a little bit. So anyway,
next one is from
it's a cool idea.
Yeah, I think the juice ain't worth the squeeze, as they would say.
Sure.
Next one's from Sigma. Interesting. Pablo is always saying that he's not a deck builder. He usually gets the list from his teammates or net decks and then just tunes the deck, which is a skill in itself too, of course. But he says he's not a very good core deck builder. We've talked about this concept before. Do you think it's actually a different skill?
Yes, I think inception of ideas in Flesh and Blood versus. So I think people overrate tuning decks in general because I think often you can't shine a turd, right? You know what I'm saying? So I think often if the idea is not good to start with, then tuning something is kind of moot. But I do agree that I think they are different things. I think people can come up with these inceptions of ideas, but also a lot of the time people who come up with these ideas are also going to tune them. But you see some really raw ideas that come out, I think, and people take them who are good players and maybe have some aspect of good deck building knowledge and take them a step further. So I think separate, but there's overlap, and at times there's, you can't do one without the other.
Yeah, I feel like I've just tossed around the idea that tuners are just, it's kind of just copium because they're just bad deck builders effectively, and deck builders are also.
Aren't you a tuner?
Yeah, for sure. Hey, no,
I think there's a bit of both.
No
honestly.
ego over here. But yeah, I feel like if there is like a differing sort of trait, it's probably that deck builders are a bit more optimistic. I think that they're trying to live the dream a bit, and the tuners tend to get into the nitty gritty of the math and like what actually works. I feel like that can be lost in deck building, but the innovation and the creativity that comes from building from nothing it's more like an art where, unless you're Michael Hamilton, then it's fucking math. It's more like an art than where tuning is more of a science, I think.
Yeah, I think 80-20 majority of the time, but I think there's always exceptions to that. But yeah, interesting. I in terms of Pablo specifically, my view has always been, in just brief conversations and when we had him on the pod, that he does do some amount of deck building. But yeah, I mean, there's some amazing players on that wider team they have. I think Daniel Correas, who's top 8 at LA, is part of that group as well. So yeah, no, not surprised.
Yep, and the last one here is from Super Checkers. They say, okay, but that intro sound clip of 15 minutes jump scared me.
Good. Should we just chuck one in right now?
Yeah. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and head into the main topic, which is the PT Amsterdam preview. And I know that Hayden has a ton of hot takes.
The first question, Brendan, before we get into all the results of this final week of CC heading into Pro Tour Amsterdam, is the format shit? Is it a bad format? And I think the answer is it's not. I think, there has been this discourse about, we talked at the kind of top of the show, the enjoyability of the format, but I just think it really isn't. I think there's some things that you have to accept about the format, and that's no different to previous formats in terms of some of the aspects, but I just think overall, there's going to be some great games played this weekend, which we'll kind of get into some of the things I expect, some predictions. But battle hardened results, and I think starting to think about meta predictions and where we're going to land. The big question is how much Zen, how much new, I think, is the question that everyone's asking if you're prepping for this Pro Tour. How much Zen am I expecting? How much new am I expecting? If you look at the kind of battle hardened results from last week, if you look to Bologna, Nu was the most played deck, actually, ahead of Zen by a decent chunk, actually. Zen's second most played, followed by Azalea, Enigma, Levia, all pretty close, actually, which is interesting. I think Azalea has really kind of been around that second kind of tier of representation through most of national season. Enigma, we know, has been pretty popular. All three of the new heroes have been fairly popular, but I think Nu really overtook Enigma as we closed up the national season, and Zen, of course, has been kind of top dog. And then if you look at Bologna as well, Kano, Dash, KO, Prism, and Riptide, Victor, all fairly well represented as well, which is interesting to see. In terms of the top 8 at that event, I kind of spoiled it already, was won by a Max. The lone... there's 2 Maxes in the event. One of them won, but the top 8 was 2 Riptide, which I've been talking about Riptide a little bit, haven't I, Brendan? I think Riptide is realer than people realize. 2 Enigmas, 3 Nu, and a Max. What are we missing in that top 8?
Yeah, and I'm just looking at your pictures, and I'm like, hey, if you didn't know shit about Flesh and Blood, you weren't testing. It'd be hard to make the case that Zen's even the best deck. If you took these, I know a small sample size, and I know
for sure, definitely.
Yeah, but it's not even a clear image.
Mm-hmm.
All we got is these these pro players that are complaining about it on Twitter, and that's got to be the number one thing contributing to Zen being the best deck in the form. I know the deck is powerful. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of diversity in this data.
Yeah, I think what people are maybe struggling with more than the diversity of the format or the strength of Zen is honestly probably more the play patterns. That is the general kind of theme that's running through, and that's kind of why I wanted to make that statement at the top of the main topic. But
yeah. What does that even mean? Can you talk about that? Because we talk about enjoyability in a card game. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, and I would say oftentimes, the 80-20. The 80% is that one man's trash is another man's treasure. Someone might not like something, but somebody else enjoys it. I think that 20% of the time, so what is the exception and not the example, you actually have gameplay patterns that suck, that are not enjoyed by a lot of people. Examples. Magic the Gathering. I would say that the Turbo Discard Grief package is not super fun. It was not fun in Modern, wasn't fun in Legacy. The people who liked it, they're massive outliers because it is the reduction of decisions. Lorcana, I'm sure you saw that card get errata, the most ridiculous errata you've ever seen. That card was...
You mean how they got rid of a card and printed a new one, right?
Yes. So that was another turbo discard card that came down early. There were no answers, and it would just reduce the amount of game actions and decision trees that could be made in a game. That stuff actually sucks. But you're talking about someone doesn't like a control deck. Well, some other people do. Someone doesn't like an aggro deck. Some other people do. So talk to me about why in current Flesh and Blood, why the gameplay patterns are, maybe objectively bad.
And it's hard because I disagree, but I think what people take issue with when it comes to Zen specifically, because people talk about the combo decks, the illusionists of the format and what they do, and Nu stops you playing the game. It's like, we've gone through this all before with ice and things like this. I think what really hits people, I'll use the Zen example. So, I would use a kind of a draw parallel. When you're playing like a video game, right, and you get to like a boss, and the boss at the exact same points in the fight does the exact same things, right? Mm-hmm. But there's one particular thing. It's really powerful, and you always stumble into it, and it feels like it takes away like 3/4 of your health, kind of thing. That's kind of what people are. That's kind of what I'm equating this to, is that people don't enjoy that experience. They don't enjoy when people go, block with traverse, block with striders at some point in the game, go and get my stuff, do the big turn. Like, that's what people are still having cheesy. Issue with. I guess that's people's issue, but I think the thing is that yes, that there's ways you could. I think people are looking at, okay, how do I stop that from happening? You can't really stop that from happening. Like, there's some bad ways you can play the game and potentially kind of delay it. I don't think it's particularly good. You can do some stuff with maybe dash and destroy their equipment in non-ideal times. But I think what people who are enjoying this format more, innovating and coming up with some great ideas that we might see this weekend, is they're kind of playing on a different kind of game plan. They're like, okay, you have your thing, I have my thing, and then we're going to interact on the other turns, potentially. But yeah, you have this powerful button, and I just think we've seen this in other iterations. It's just this one in particular. People, because it's equipment on the board, people can always point to it. But when it was a Channel Mount Heroic being dropped, or with a Force of Nature turn or something.
What about when it was every fucking card in your deck blocking for 3? Like, that's even worse.
So
like,
anyway,
that's PlayStation play.
That's the thing. I want to keep going with the starter and results, but you see it, right? You see it. You know what's up.
I'm just trying to be the voice of the people here because, yeah, I think it's easy to listen to the vocal minority. It could be the vocal majority here, but
I was about to say
it's easy to focus in on like the negativity, right? But it's very, very hard to make an objective case that something is good or bad because people enjoy different things.
100%. Yep. And I'm going to give my opinion, right, which is what I've just done. So let's go to Battle Hard in Bali. Cool place to have a Battle Hard, by the way. And the Indonesian community is fantastic, so shout out to them. Zen, most played. Then Nu, closely followed by, or Azalea and Nu actually equal most played, followed by KO and Enigma and Dash. A couple of Bolton in there as well. So, Zen most played there. I think maybe this is a small Battle Hard, and so interesting to look at the top 8. The top 8 was, that's really tiny because I made that one too small. You want me to read it for you? Yep. No, it's okay. It's so it's 2 Zen in the top 8, a Bolton, a KO, a Dash, an Azalea, 2 KO actually, sorry, and a Nu. So pretty diverse top 8 there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so obviously Zen is the only deck that's represented twice, but that's like nothing compared to what we've had back, in some
KOs, no, 2 KOs.
Oh,
2 KOs
sorry, I didn't even see the 2 KOs. Yeah, so
yeah,
but still, even 2 of 8 in the top 8, like that seems relatively healthy.
Mm-hmm. One by Zen in the end.
And am I maybe focusing on the wrong thing by focusing on Zen? Is the more common opinion is just that the gameplay patterns of the format sucks, or is Zen the complaint?
No, I think people have some issues with more so the gameplay. I think Zen is the target of that because it's play patterns, it's equipment use that start on the board, it's specific patterns that seem to repeat. But I honestly think people even have, and this is where I don't disagree on some of the Zen play patterns sometimes, but I diverge on a lot of other decks in the format. And I think it's okay to have a deck in the format that is one of the best decks in the format that does something that's repetitive. I think that's easy, it's approachable, it makes it easy for people to play. I think that's okay. But people also maybe have that complaint about a couple of the other heroes as well, which I just kind of, don't agree with. The Prisms of the world, the News of the world, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Let's get on to... No, not another Battle Hard, but the Realm Fest that happened in New Jersey over the weekend as well. 92 players in the US, 15 Zen, 10 Victor. That looks like a response to the Zen kind of metagame. Nu is the 3rd most played, then Kano, then Azalea, then Levire and KO. So that ends up being a Zen mirror match in the final. I think Michael Hamilton was in that final. And the top 8 was 2 Kanos, 2 Prisms. I guess it can't have been 2 Zens because this top 8 says it wasn't 2 Zens. Also, I swear I watched a Zen final.
Also, can't have been Michael Hamilton. I don't see him on this top 8.
Yeah, weird. I guess I've got the wrong. Maybe I was looking at the wrong event. I don't know. This I'll take back that Zen versus Zen mirror final. I think maybe I clicked on the wrong stream for Realm. I was trying to work out because I saw this top 8 bracket that they posted. I was trying to work out who won it. And I maybe just clicked on the wrong stream, to be honest. Anyway, so 1 Nu, 2 Kano, Azalea, 2 Prism, a Zen, and a Levire in top 8. So, yeah, like quite an interesting spread there.
Can we acknowledge how Victor got dog walked in Swiss?
Are you surprised?
No, but it's just like, it's funny because he's played the 2nd most played deck. You're like, oh, it's in response. But he just gets absolutely, just doesn't even make it in the top 8 after being the 2nd most played deck. That kind of sucks.
Yeah, I'm not sold on that one. Let's talk about meta. So this is the results from the weekend and the lead up. Obviously, that's a response to national season, then the yellow and blue bonds banning that's happened. I want to talk meta. I think it's pretty clear at this point that the top 2 decks heading into Pro Tour Amsterdam are going to be Zen and Nu. I think the bigger question is which one's going to be the most played? Because I think the assumption would have been national season, Zen. I think even the assumption maybe the week of the banning was that it'd be Zen. I'm not so certain that that's true. I think a lot of teams are going to land on Nu. I think Zen, people are a little bit worried about the down power of Zen. People want to beat Zen. People always want to beat the perceived best deck, right? And I think Nu has the best matchup of the popular decks or the better decks there. Nu itself is quite powerful as well. So I think there's no argument these are the 2 most played decks. I think though Nu might actually edge out Zen in terms of most played deck, which might be controversial.
Okay, I put my money on Zen, but I'm happy to take the opposite bet on you. I think it's probably a flip either way.
I think Zen's the safer bet, probably. Yeah. The bookies would definitely be the favorites in Zen, but I just, the discourse, the kind of testing from what I've been hearing from groups at large, it seems like a lot of people are. It's so funny. This is the conversation, because we'll talk about some of the fringe decks. A lot of people were testing kind of more innovative ideas and fringe ideas, and then this is like a lot of what people said. They say things like, "I'm like flipping between Nu and X. If I can't work out this matchup, I'm back on Nu, or if I can't work out this matchup, I'm back on Zen." That kind of seemed like it was coming down to a lot of people on Nu and Zen, and then testing other things and flipping back if they couldn't work out specific matchups or get to points that they wanted to get to. So. Yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see what people come with. I think what might happen is that more people float back to Zen than people float back to Nu, because I think Nu is just generally a harder deck to play and master. And maybe some teams just come up with some great mirror tech or some tech into Nu as Zens, and people float back to Zen. But I honestly think 40% of the meta, even 45% of the meta, Nu and Zen, I think is not another question here.
That's pretty high.
I agree. But I think they're the two best decks, and I think it's honestly not that close. And I think if you look at kind of the Nationals data and representation, it started to become that this was a bit of a two-horse race in terms of just representation and results between the two heroes. And not to say that other things are winning, right? We know Dash is winning, Kano is winning, Prism's winning, Enigma's winning here and there, but by far and away, those two heroes started to really run away with it. So especially in the latter half of the National season, once people work stuff out.
Fair enough.
I think Azalea is kind of a question mark around. It's typically being kind of around that third most played deck. I guess with the kind of idea that it's actually pretty reasonable into both Zen and Nu, but maybe not amazing. And if depending on how people set up their deck as Nu, it might not have the best matchup. I'm really interested to see where Azalea ends. I honestly think Azalea could be anywhere from like 6 or 7% played to 15% played, and I think it's going to land on that lower side of playability, probably in the single digits, maybe 10% mark. This is kind of where I think it might land.
What about the third category you got here?
Brendan's eyeing up the 5 to 10%ers. This is where I think kind of if the top two are 45% of the meta, and then you've got maybe Azalea floating around as the third most played deck. These are the decks that are challenging Azalea for the third most played deck. Kano, Enigma, Victor. There's a few others that we'll talk about, but I want to talk about these three specifically because they've been kind of represented over the last weekend quite significantly. Kano's in a good spot. I think I could see Kano easily being the third most played deck, and a deck that people were testing or have come to for the simple fact that it's really good into Nu and has a pretty reasonable Zen matchup, especially if you're prepared for what you think people are going to set up with and you know how to combat that. So I think there's a world where Kano is the third most played deck at PT, which is pretty insane, right?
Yeah, suddenly it's not cool anymore. Nah, it's still cool.
Kindle, man. Kindle changed it all.
Tone of the Imperial Flame for
right?
Wizard.
Yeah, literally. You talked about Victor before, right? And you were talking about Big Dog walked in Swiss. I think Victor's one that people will play for the fact that they feel it has a good Zen matchup, which you know what, to be fair, it does, but I think it has a ton of really bad matchups, and its Zen matchup is not better than Nu's. So I think a lot of people who would play Victor will just play Nu, honestly, but people will still play Victor. But it's not going to be like, it was a round fest, like 15% of the meta or something, 10% of meta or something. Yeah, I imagine it's more like 4 or 5%. I think Victor's going to drop off.
It's got a nice virtual auto loss in a Kano, assuming that Visit the Goldman Estate did not change that matchup significantly.
It's got so many auto losses, I swear.
It's got some really bad
speaking of which,
matchup.
Enigma. Not a great matchup for Victor either. Enigma's one that's kind of bounced around during the national season. I'm interested to see where it lands. I think if people come up with some really innovative stuff, it's going to be more represented than maybe you'd expect. It could even be that third most played deck, 15% of the meta sort of thing. I think the question mark really, and this is the big question I want to ask you and to kind of talk about, something like Enigma is the first time you see on this list a deck that just has a bad matchup into Zen. So you can build it to have a better matchup into Zen than its typical terrible matchup. I think you lose so much. Talk about deck building last week, right? One of the tips that most people gave us is don't try and make a 10%er into a 30%er at the expense of what your deck does or a lot of other matchups. And I think people will realize that if they're going to play Enigma, they're probably going to mostly be giving up the Zen matchup, honestly. And this is kind of the first deck. This and Prism, from an illusionist standpoint, are probably the ones that interest me the most. Are people going to try and level 2 the meta? If level 0 is Zen, level 1 is Nu. Are people going to try and level 2 the meta, hope that Zen drops away, target the likes of Nu, Kano, maybe even a little bit of Azalea in the case of playing Prism, and play something like Enigma or Prism?
I would never level to a meta like this. Would you?
Yeah, I think I would.
Oh.
I think I honestly would. I'll tell you, Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you at the end of the pod the deck that I would play, that I would sleeve up if I was going to the PT this weekend.
Dash. Prism.
Nope. Yes.
Yeah. Predictable.
I would play Prism, and I would be trying to play on that level 2, which is, to be fair, Brendan knows me, not usually something I like to do. I usually like to more be on like level 1.
Bro, has level 2 ever worked in Flesh and Blood?
Yeah.
When?
Dude,
these potatoes, they just bring the best deck every time.
I think PTLA.
Okay, so PTLA.
Yeah, but okay. But I think the question is, maybe the reason I feel this is a little bit different is that I think actually level 0 is a little bit simplistic, and level 1 is actually the correct best. I think Nu might actually be the best deck. That's the thing. Or, the deck in the best position, and potentially the most played deck. And that's why I would move to something like a response to that, which is Prism. If I didn't think that, if I thought level 2 was, responding to the meta, let's say Zen is pre-ban, Zen by far and away the best deck, and Nu is kind of that level 1, then I wouldn't level 2 it, because I think Zen would just by far and away be the most played deck. Like, I think nationals and pre the ban, I saw a world where we show up to PT and it's like Starvo levels, like nearly 30% of the meta. We're just not in that spot anymore.
I've never seen I'm trying to remember. I don't think I've ever seen a Fab Pro Tour that wasn't easily predictable if you just level 1'd it. Like, it just always tends to be like that. Oh, God, when was the last time?
So if you level 1 it.
Okay, I was surprised at Barcelona with Icelander. I think we had more Icelander than I expected at Barcelona.
So Dromai was... But that was a kind of a weird meta, because it was like, what actually is the best deck? So if it was Dromai, is level 0. Level 1 is, I guess, the aggro decks, the Fires of the World. Maybe even these Bravo plans that people thought were good into it.
No, they were terrible.
Yeah, that's the thing that's challenging, is that, actually was Icelander just had the same kind of percentage of matchup. But anyway, I agree. The other thing with this as well, so just saying, comparing to the Starvo meta, it really isn't that. And if you think that level 1 is actually, so if you say it's level 1, then Zen's the most played deck, 20 to 25% of the meta. Nu is 15 to 20% of the meta. But that's the kind of level 0. But I actually think it's more level 1, and it's going to be Nu, potentially 20 to 25% of the meta, and Zen 15 to 22ish%, probably 18 to 22ish%. But I could be wrong, right? And it could just be, like you say, level 0, Zen's the most played deck. It's not going to be 30% of the meta. Like, I would stake money on that. That's the thing. So, fair. And I think if you look back at the past Pro Tours, the top deck has generally been around 25%, of 22 to 25% of the meta. The Lexis of the world, the KOs of the world. Barcelona, yes, an exception. You go back to Worlds before that, Icelander. Actually, Worlds has been the outlier, interestingly, right? Both Worlds have had more diverse metas than the Pro Tours, interestingly. You look at it.
I wonder if that's coincidence, like it's just
I think it's pure coincidence.
Yeah. So do I.
Pure coincidence. Okay, so yeah, question is, do you try and take that level 2 approach? Do you try and play the deck that potentially responds to the shift in the meta? I think if you were ever going to do it at a tier 4 event, this is the time to do it. I think if I'm looking at the 2 Illusionists, I think Prism does that better, honestly. I think Enigma has both just a worse Zen matchup. I also think it has a worse Nu and Kano matchup as well. So I would probably be on that. And I think Kano's in a really good spot and might be the 3rd most played deck. So I think Prism is maybe the more interesting of that group.
Okay. What about the
Brutes?
others?
You want to talk about Brutes?
The Brutes. All right, KO.
Well, because Brutes had a pretty good showing over the weekend, right? I mean, we talked about 2 KOs in top 8 in Bali.
One Levia.
No
Realm Fest.
Yeah, Levia. No Brutes in Bologna, but we'll talk about Riptide in a second. I think KO is interesting. KO went from a deck that was like 45-55 into everything, mostly the 55, into a deck that's 45-55 into most things, and on the 45 side more so. And that's honestly that's that small, that 5% shift for KO. I think KO is a reasonable choice, but I just think if you're going to play KO, you should probably just play Zen, I think, honestly. So I think KO won't be more than sort of 5 to 8% of the meta, really. And it'll be people making mistakes, I think. It's like Victor. Don't play Victor. Don't play KO, honestly. I don't see it. Levia, I don't know. I am just now at this point such a non-believer of that hero being viable in Flesh and Blood at this point in time. And people keep trying to tell me otherwise, but I ain't seeing it. And I haven't been proved otherwise. So, Dash, obviously coming off the back of a decent Nationals season. The Zen matchup hasn't gotten worse on paper, but I think people have gotten better at playing that matchup. I think Dash is also, though, adapted. I think the real issue is that Nu is probably your second worst matchup. And yet you can win it. You can just kind of disrespect them. But I think these new decks are getting better. I think the new players are getting better. And I just think Dash is probably not where you want to be this weekend, honestly. Unless you're like running the opposite gambit to the Prism line, where you're like, okay, I think Zen's going to be 25 to 30% of the meta. Nu's going to be like 15% of the meta. I'm playing, I'm just dodging Nu. If that's the plan, sure. Especially if you think KO is going to be popular. Dash is a pretty good KO matchup. Go for it. I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
Defend your Riptide.
So I want to talk about two decks together, Boltyn and Riptide. Riptide we can kind of start with. I think, obviously two slots in Battle Hard and Bologna top 8. I talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I made that infamous tweet, Brendan. If I'm not going to Amsterdam, but if I was, there's a high chance I would sleeve up Riptide.
Low influence these days.
I think the new matchup is really, honestly, really good. I think it's so tough for Nu. So I think if you were trying to take a deck that you think is, you're trying to position yourself, it's also your Zen matchup. I thought it was good. I thought it was really good. Turns out it's fine. It's really draw dependent. You need to see a lot of your disruption, but you do a lot of damage as well. But you can't have your miss of a disruption turn line up with their good turn, right? Which is just classic kind of playing into Zen. That's the game pattern thing from before. So you are putting your life in their hands a little bit. And sometimes, you're playing Riptide and your hands are honestly just a bit awkward. But I do think if you are taking a deck purely to play into Nu and Zen, like Riptide is a pretty good option. Some of your other matchups, honestly, like you just pack up and go to lunch. Like it's actually insane. Kano is unwinnable, I think. Like unwinnable. I think Prism is pretty bad, honestly, and I don't think Enigma's much better either from my experience. But I think, if you're just hoping to play against Nu and Zen all day, Riptide, reasonable option.
What about this Boltyn guy? By the way, people love that. You say the B word on this podcast, people they start coming for me. I don't hold the same opinions I held about Boltyn 5 sets ago, just by the way. A couple sets cards. Yeah, exactly. A lot of cards have been printed.
People might have missed this, Brendan, but there was also a Armory deck that came out for Boltyn.
Yes, sir.
Recently.
Low price
and
of $59.99, right?
Is that what it is, USD? I feel that's what it is in Australia. Surely not in USD.
I don't know. I don't remember. I just remember the tweets. Oh, God. I feel like I've tried so hard to get away from that side of Flesh and Blood Twitter, but I can't escape it.
I'm really excited for the Azalea one, by the way. That's masquerading as a Riptide, but yeah. I think that Boltyn is potentially in a really good spot. You have this, so I think you've gotten some upgrades, but mostly what you've got with Boltyn is you've got this ability to play either as a combo deck or either as a deck that can grind a little bit. And I think that's kind of disrespected a little bit in this meta. Boltyn's been slowly being given upgrades. I think the pair ability kind of sucks, honestly, but you have some really powerful abilities. And I think you have some powerful abilities to do some combo damage potentially. And I think Boltyn is probably my dark horse to the event. I definitely wouldn't be sliving up, right? But I've heard some people might be, Brennan, and I've heard that it might be a bit of a dark horse this weekend, so I will not dismiss anything. I haven't necessarily seen deck lists from people, but, Can
we talk about Limited?
Let's talk about Limited.
Okay. Do you see/hear complaints about Limited as well? I know a lot of the flack has been on Constructed for this format. People complaining about this Limited format at all?
I think people like this limited format. Yeah. And I think people's complaints, honestly, earlier on were misguided. I think not necessarily understanding the format at a deeper level, I think honestly was their challenge. Where I think people are, even I had this a little bit. I really felt Nu to be quite weak and I didn't want to draft it. And now I think that I have a better understanding of what Nu looks like in Constructed. That's helped me with Nu and Limited as well. And whereas I thought that maybe, against this Pro Tour, we'd see pods that's like 1 to 2 Nu all the time. It's not going to be the case. And it wasn't the case at Nationals either. And I think this is a lot more balanced than I initially thought. And I think people are really realizing that. I think people don't have too many complaints about Limited. People always have complaints about Limited, but people don't have complaints about Part of Mythos specifically, and it's limited gameplay. I think the the draft experience is pretty good. I think the gameplay experience is pretty good. And honestly, the set went a little bit down for me post Tokyo, and then it's just gone up and up and up the more I've kind of played and drafted and tried to get better at it. I think it's there's so many ways to build your decks. There's so much gameplay considerations. I think there's no kind of blowouts on either side, which I think is a great place to be. So I'm really actually excited to watch Limited this weekend. I think some people are going to come up with some really interesting draft strategies because some cards continue to be quite undervalued by the way people are drafting, some cards overvalued, and I think some strategies that honestly haven't been fully explored at the stage either.
How do you feel about the other heroes?
Oh, apart from new?
Mm-hmm.
I think they're all pretty balanced, honestly. Like my preference was at Nationals to draft Enigma or Zen. I felt a little bit fortunate to get out with a 2-1 and a 2-1 in my 2 drafts at Nationals and make top 8. I managed to 6-0 CC to do so because I didn't feel super prepared. I was so reliant on drafting Zen and Enigma and not drafting new. But I think if people have a well-rounded... So people have some strategies, right? There'll be forces out there. There'll be people who have preferences to take cards early because of the way they value them and get into a hero. But I think if you can truly stay open and truly understand how to navigate these drafts and the archetypes and how you want to draft, I think you'll get really, really rewarded in the set. But I do also think that people, if you play like 2 or 3 heroes really well and understand the archetypes that you can get into and specific kind of cards that are under or overvalued in those heroes, I think you can also do really well. And I think some people will come with some interesting strategies as well that aren't just, I'm going to fatigue my opponent.
Slight tangent, but a question that came to my mind. Do you think they could ever do a tier 4 event that was half class constructed, half living legend format, or is it too much to ask players to bring two fully completed and, potentially very different constructed decks to a tournament? Is that too much of a logistical ask and a financial ask of players?
We play Worlds with Blitz, Draft, and CC. That's fine. We can do it. Is it the right thing to do? I think as you grow kind of the footprint of Flesh and Blood and the following of Flesh and Blood, is that the kind of event you want to be broadcasting, honestly?
If you're looking for just viewers, I think yes.
But just do all Living Legend then. If that's the reason,
don't be teasing me with a good time over here. Come on,
playing Chain again.
Yeah,
but honestly, I think if you're at that point, I think you just do all Living Legend. I think it's interesting because the limited and constructed pieces like, hey, test the skills of both, open packs, show off the set. My problem with like limited formats in tier 4 events, honestly, is that they keep not being near release. I think Magic has it right where, within a month of release of a product, the Pro Tour happens.
Yeah, players are interested in it too. Viewers like, oh, now I can go see the pros draft this live. It's actually pretty cool. Like I watched, all right, I'm not the biggest viewer fan of Limited and Flesh and Blood, but the Magic Pro Tour, in which case I sometimes skip the draft format if I'm not aware of it. With Modern Horizons 3, I actually watched it. It was interesting to watch the pros draft Rising Chrysalis, the mythic uncommon or uncommon.
So I don't know, but anyway, look at the heavy hitters world premiere and the calling. Like that was really well watched, and it's because one, that set was really cool, I think, for limited watchability, but also it was all new and people wanted to see and learn and see what people were doing. And you take that up a level to a tier 4 event with, a lot of the most well-known pros and things like that. I think it translates really well. So anyway, digress a little bit, but I also think it would be good for constructed as well. Seeing the best players in the world work out a new constructed format that's actually brand new because of the set, as opposed to just being, kind of brand new because of some changes and ban restricted. Any predictions for this weekend?
Already gave mine. I would say Zen most played deck. In terms of win, I would love to see some Kanos. The top tables. I'd love to see Kano on stream. I think that's fun. I know that they don't like to have Kano on stream, but maybe that's changed. I don't know.
I think Kindle's changed that a little bit, maybe.
Kindle's changed that now. It's like
dude, it showcases what Flesh and Blood wants to do. Higher ceiling, higher variance. It's true, though.
Yeah, that cuts a little too deep. Be careful with that.
This is what it is. I think the top 8 is going to be New, Zen, Prism, and Kanos, honestly. I think if anything else pops into that top 8, that's going to surprise me. I'm cool. Excited to see it. Max took out a Battle Hardened last weekend. Riptide's been showing up. KO's been seeing some resurgence. But, yeah.
Sorry. Do we know who's on commentary yet? I don't think I've seen an asset for it.
Yeah, we do. It's Mr. Classic, Kieran McIntyre. It's going to be there. I think Erica is on commentary. Ethnic Smoke's out there doing commentary, I think, as well. And maybe Rahman, I think, that's the 4 for commentary, I think.
Okay. Cool.
So, I will be watching. I'm super excited. I think if I have any other predictions, it would be Brutes don't do well. Victor doesn't do well. I'm excited to watch a couple of the European groups in particular. I'm excited to see how the group that we worked with for LA do. Always looking for my friends as well to do well, see what they how they do.
A lot of respect for those guys. They work really hard.
100%. Looking to Mr. Evan Herndon, who US national champion. What can he do in Amsterdam? Shout out to you, Evan. Want to see it. Yakuza too.
Yo, that guy's still around? No, I'm kidding.
Probably playing with fire. I don't know. And I'm also looking forward to actually watching some interesting strategies in Limited. I'm going to definitely watch that first draft portion. I just really hope that it piques my interest quickly.
Are they doing draft before? Sorry, are they doing draft before the gameplay nowadays? Are they delaying it?
Yeah, they are. I think they're doing like open deck lists in the draft. I think if I'm LSS and I'm going to cover a table, I'm looking to like scout out on the Friday and ask people about Limited and their thoughts on the format. And then I'm looking for those people in some 3-0 pods to showcase. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for necessarily the name or the best player. I mean, that would help 100%, but I'm looking for people who might have some really interesting takes on the format so they can broadcast and show that.
In my opinion, and who cares about my opinion, but Flesh and Blood needs to get with the times when it comes to production. I'm not saying production's bad, but Magic set the precedent with 0.
Oh, they've gone up a level.
Almost 0 downtime. Lorcana's doing that for what it's worth. You have to delay the stream, you run back VODs, you start 2 to 3 hours later. That is how you should do. I'm not saying this is not, obviously it's not related
I think LSS is doing that, right?
I'm not aware, but if they aren't, let's do that because that is what TCGs do now. And it makes, it's so much better for engagement rather than B-roll and hitting like 45-minute outros. Also, when tournament software goes down or we go to time.
Yeah, you're covered.
I would not be surprised if they're not doing that, but if they aren't, please get on that.
One critique I have that when it comes to talk about like B-roll, one thing I'm missing from Magic these days, because I watched some coverage for the last Pro Tour, is I was missing a little bit. I felt the news desk and sort of the interviews and the deck techs that they kind of do were a little bit lacking. That's kind of because it felt like they had to move really quickly because they were delaying VODs and stuff like that. I liked that there was no true downtime, but also at the same time, especially, we're in the TikTok generation, right? But also at the same time, I would like those kind of bite-sized in between stuff to still be there in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, you got to tell a story with the tournament. It's really,
exactly.
It's really
got to have narrative.
Yeah, it's not about the gameplay. It's more about the people. It's about the narrative and how to do that effectively and how to make card games, which are probably the worst spectator ports ever been created because the domain knowledge is insane. How to make it palatable to like normal players, casual players, but also people who don't play the game. That's a tough cookie right there.
It is. Speaking of cookies, on that note,
yeah,
that is our Pro Tour Amsterdam preview pod. Massive thank you to everyone who's tuned in. Big good luck goes out to all those competing this weekend. Looking forward to watching again. Wish I was there. I would have probably at this point sleeved Prism, but actually my testing would have looked very different if I was going Brendan. So maybe I would have landed elsewhere. I'm sure I probably would have, honestly.
Yeah. But, and if you O3 draft because the people in your pod don't know how to draft, be sure to add us. We'd love to talk about it on next week's pod.
Please. Yeah, please. All right, take us out.
Anyway, if you enjoy this podcast and what you do is leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify as a video version of this on YouTube, youtube.com/ArsenalPass. Twitter's a Brendan APG and Fien_Dale. Fien_Dale has been on a tweet spree. Maybe we'll continue. And big shout out to all the Arsenal Pass patrons. You help us do what we do. And yeah, once again, good luck to everybody in Amsterdam. This format doesn't suck, maybe.
Correct.
See y'all next week.